Hey, you, I am actually recording this after the upcoming episode is going to play for you. And the reason why is I want to let you know a little secret, maybe not so secret. We are transforming the podcast. We are going to be taking it from triggered, can we play with that, to drumroll, please, empowered human. Yes, I've been slipping it in here and there. It is really integral to the core of all of my work, of all of my communication, that empowerment is at the core. And so as we've been developing empowered humans, both on the podcast and off, we've realized we need a transition, we need a transformation. We really need to honor that empowerment is at the core of our messaging. And so we have worked with some professionals, and it is time for us to change the show title. There will be some artwork changes, some music shifts, but you will still have me as your host. We will still be leaning into our edge. We will still be invited to be curious, but most of all, instead of just transforming hard conversations into teachable moments around our triggers and the things that are uncomfortable, we're really going to be focusing on how do you heal your humanity in spite of this, because of this, due to this, whatever the connection is to the triggers that you have as a human being. Empowered human is really going to focus on, now, how do we give you skills to heal that humanity, the humanity within you, within me, and within the world at large. So I hope that you'll continue to stay tuned in. I am absolutely terrified that we're going to have this shift. And I'm like, when have all the people go? But genuinely, I have to believe that if I trust what my core message is for me, how I live my life as an empowered human, and how I have so many of you who are saying you also want to live that empowered human life. So I have to believe that this is the right move for you, for me, and for the world at large. So I thank you for listening in. I hope that you continue to listen in to this upcoming episode and to every episode after that. Thanks so much. And of course, y'all stay curious. And also, stay tuned. Follow me on Instagram at Drama Therapist Nina for more. Hey, you empowered human. It is Nina Garcia here, and you are officially listening to Triggered. Can we play with that wherever you get your podcasts? Today's episode is like every other episode in that we are going to help you transform a hard conversation into a teachable moment. But today's episode has a very special guest, Dr. Debi Silber. Folks, this episode is so full of tips, tricks, psychoeducation, and tools. If you do not have your journal right now, or a really good friend to dialogue with about what comes up for you in this episode, you got to get it on board, because I am telling you, there is so much goodness. Who is this episode for? Thank you for asking, friend. If you didn't already catch that, Dr. Debi Silber is the owner and CEO of the Post Betrayal Institute. So what are we going to be exploring today? The triggers around and transforming hard conversations into teachable moments around betrayal. If you have experienced betrayal in your family, like some of us have, with your exes, like some of us have, with your current partner, like some of us have. Oh my gosh, folks, if you are human, you might well be able to benefit from this episode. So without further ado, grab those journals that I mentioned. We are going to lean into this. Dr. Debi is so well versed. You all are really going to get so much from this. If you're struggling with betrayal and you are ready to move through the 5 stages of healing, Dr. Debi will tell you more on that, then go ahead and listen. And right now, you know that I am so curious. Are you ready to play?
Welcome to Triggered. Can we play with that? You know that moment when your emotions ramp up in an instant, leaving you feeling helpless, frozen, or out of control? In that moment, you've been emotionally hijacked, the very definition of triggered. And I want to ask you, can we play with that? I'm Nina L. Garcia, drama therapist and empowerment coach of Houston Creative Arts Therapy. Join me as we discover ways to empower you and the people who mean the most to you to transform hard conversations into teachable moments. Triggered. Real playful, real respectful, real empowered.
Let's take a breath. Welcome, special guest, Dr. Debi Silber. How you doing over there?
Doing great. Really looking forward to this conversation.
Good, good. I love it when we lean into our edge. So, of course, that's what we're going to be doing, right? But before we lean into our edge, I do like to invite us to, have consent to do that. So, I like to say, from here on out, are we consenting to, transform a hard conversation into a teachable moment, maybe get into some sticky, uncomfortable territory, but to keep moving so that we can go through it instead of sitting in it? Do we consent to doing that?
100%. That's my absolute intention.
Okay. I love it, right? That's our intention setting forward, and who knows what will happen. This is a great skill for our listeners out there. If you are also practicing consent, giving yourself consent and others consent to move forward also means consent to be able to say, I don't want to move forward. You also have consent to say that. Right. All right. So before we move into the meat and potatoes of the episode, so to speak, Dr. Debbie, would you be so kind as to share with us, any identities, roles, things that are present with you so that we can just locate, where in our story we might be, relevant to where you are as a human being?
Sure. Well, I'm running the PBT, Post Betrayal Transformation Institute. Of course, you don't do something like that until you have to, or unless you have to. And it's I've been in business over 30 years, health, mindset, personal development. I had a really painful betrayal from my family, thought I did everything I needed to do to heal from that. And then it happened a few years later. This time it was my husband. That was the deal breaker. So I got him out of the house, looked at the two experiences, thinking what's similar to these two, of course, me, but what else? And realized, boundaries were always getting crossed. I never took my needs seriously. And I decided something has to change. So here I was, 4 kids, 6 dogs, a thriving business. And I said, I'm going back for a PhD. And it was in transpersonal psychology. I didn't know how I was going to pay for it. I didn't know how I was going to manage it. But then it was time to do a study. So I studied betrayal because really I just wanted to heal. I didn't know how or what. And I studied betrayal, what holds us back, what helps us heal, and what happens to us physically, mentally, and emotionally when the people closest to us lie, cheat, and deceive. That study led to 3 groundbreaking discoveries, which changed my health, my family, my work, my life.
It's just like, there it is. It's like the whole rounded, well-rounded picture of what we're about to explore. Audience, if you are not excited yet, you better get there. So I think this is such a timely episode. And I will say, not just for the world, right? But for me personally, a lot of my personal stories come out on this podcast, right? And there is a lot around betrayal in the last year in particular, but this week in particular, that still is coming up around these betrayals that are not healed, right? And we often say on the podcast, right, like rupture is inevitable, repair is possible, but you got to want the repair, right? You got to do the work for the repair. It doesn't just pop up for you. And so I am so ready to have this conversation. I know our audience members are ready to have this conversation around betrayals through what they've heard from me on divorce, my family not supporting me or supporting me in ways that were not necessarily beneficial, but the betrayals that have happened there. And then all the stuff that's coming up for other people and their relationships with their families, their friends, their work relationships, so much stuff. So again, audience, just highlight this, right? We've got Dr. Debi Silber here. We've got a lifetime's worth of experience and professional and education, right, on exploring post-betrayal syndrome, okay? The research around betrayal. You've got a book out there. You got a book. It's called Trust Again, Overcoming Betrayal and Regaining Health, Confidence, and Happiness. So we are going to have that in the show notes, everyone. Don't you worry. But what I loved about when I went to your website, just the very front page, right? Just my initial walk into your world was on the very front page. It's like, have you been betrayed or have you betrayed? And it's hey, human being, let's just walk through this sticky, uncomfortable territory together, right? And then the options that are there, right? The options that are given to, right? Do we need to repair? Do we need to rebuild? Right? Just so beautiful, so simple. Even just that. What you look like you were about to say something. Share with us.
Yeah, I was going to say, actually, repairing doesn't work when it comes
tell me
to
more.
betrayal. repeat betrayals happen, it's when the whole thing crashes and burns and is rebuilt, that's when not only is healing possible, that's where transformation lives. And you mentioned the possibility. It's predictable. And if you want to get into the discoveries, we could talk all about how that happens, because it's so painful just to experience betrayal over and over and over again. And when you understand what happens and what we can do to use it as a launch pad for transformation, that's trauma well served.
When you say it's predictable, are you talking about the betrayal, right? When we think about that betrayal as being predictable, fix that for me.
I'm talking about the transformation that's waiting for the betrayed on the other side of their healing. That was one of the 3 discoveries. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. You had put in, and I'm interested, the 3 discoveries that you put in that I have here in the chat, are these the 3 discoveries that you had made in your work? Yes. Okay, I can say them or you can say them. How are you feeling? I'm ready.
Yeah. So the first was that betrayal, I had a feeling it was a different type of trauma, because I had been through the death of a loved one. I'd been through disease, and I was like, betrayal feels different. I didn't want to assume it was the same for all my study participants. So I asked them, if you've been through other traumas, does it feel different for you? Unanimously, they said, oh my gosh, it's so different. Here's why. Because it feels so intentional, we take it so personally. So the entire self gets shattered. Rejection, abandonment, belonging, confidence, worthiness, trust. Like when you lose someone you love, you grieve, you're sad, you mourn the loss. You don't necessarily lose your ability to trust. You don't question the entire relationship. You don't question your sanity. With betrayal, you do. So that type of healing needed its own name, which is now called Post Betrayal Transformation, the complete and total rebuild of your life and yourself after an experience with betrayal. So that betrayal is a different type of trauma. That was the first discovery.
Betrayal is a different type of trauma. Y'all, I already told you, get your journals out earlier. Now's the time to write that down. It's a different type of trauma that we're dealing with here. Requires maybe some different way of thinking about it, right? And there's something else that you keep
protocols to heal.
I love it, right? The different protocols, the different skills that we need in order to heal. Something that bears repeating. I think you've said it several times now, but I want y'all write this down. This is gold. The difference between like repairing and rebuilding. Would you specify and clarify that? Because I have an idea in my head of when I'm repairing versus when I'm rebuilding as you use this language.
Yeah, I'm going to give you an analogy, because I look at trust like a brick wall. And the way it works is every opportunity for someone to show that they're trustworthy, that's like one brick in that brick wall. So you could see why it takes time to build, right? Brick by brick by brick. Every opportunity, another brick in that brick wall. And then in one earth-shattering moment or series of moments, the entire wall comes down with betrayal, right? The whole thing is shattered. Here's the challenge, and this is what I so typically see. You could look at the rubble of bricks and say, I don't have the least bit of interest in watching that thing get rebuilt, and walk away, and you're totally fine. That's okay. However, and I see this with couples all the time, this is the difference. You can't repair that. There's nothing to repair. But if the person who decided to shatter the whole brick wall decides to rebuild it, that's on them. The person who's been betrayed, their role would be to be willing to watch that brick wall be rebuilt. The person who shattered it has to be a really good bricklayer, right? And build it the same way it went up the first time, brick by brick by brick. Every opportunity they have to show that they're trustworthy, that's one brick in that brick wall. Here's what I see though. So often the person shatters the brick wall. They don't really have much of an intention in rebuilding it. So the person who's been betrayed, they're like, fine, I'll do it. No, this is why they never feel safe. This is why they don't feel they can't trust. This is why they're anxious. It's not their job to do, but they feel so hurt, so sad. They just want it back the way it was. That's exactly the place where repeat betrayals happen.
Because the person who shattered the wall is not the one being responsible for the rebuilding of the wall. The person who's there, who's just supposed to actually be willing to witness, right? If the other is willing to rebuild, right? Being responsible, they're just supposed to witness that, right? But if they're not like, I don't want to feel this way, let me put the wall back together. And so, of course, the process can just, there it is, it happens again. It's repeat. It's just, and even that, there's some predictability in that. Well, if I don't learn how to be responsible for not knocking down the wall, I'll probably do it again.
Of course. And, there were actually 3 groups in the study who did not heal. The first group, this was the group where they were numbing, avoiding, distracting. It was just so painful. So let's say they ran to the doctor who put them on a mood stabilizer, anti-anxiety medication. They were emotionally eating, drinking, whatever, may have made the day a bit easier to get through, not without a price. The second group, this was the group that they had their story and they were sticking with it. They had been duped, wrong, betrayed, and that was it. They didn't heal. There was a third group too, and it reminds me of just what we're talking about now. This was the group where the betrayer had very little consequences. So whether it was out of fear of breaking up a family, financial fear, religious reasons, that was a big one. Fear of change, fear of the unknown. They did everything they could just to sort of turn the other cheek, look the other way. I saw two things with this group. The first was a further deterioration of the relationship. And two, this group was by far the most physically sick. Your broken heart can't handle that. No. But they were so afraid of that death and destruction of the old. That is the only way you rebirth the new. Whether it's here's like closing the loop on my story, rebuilding is always a choice. Whether you rebuild yourself and move along, and that was the story with my family, wasn't an option to rebuild with them. Or if the situation lends itself, if you're willing, if you want to, you rebuild something from the ground up, brand spanking new with the person who hurt you. And that's what I did with my husband. So, not long ago, as two completely transformed, revamped people, we married each other again. New rings, new vows, new dress, and our 4 kids is our bridal party. Never in a billion years would I have done that if I wasn't totally different. And for sure, if he wasn't. That's the opportunity. But without that death and destruction of the old, you never know. You don't get to see that new.
Yes. You're going through these 3 different groups. And I think the 3 that you said didn't heal, right? And the words that came up when you said the first group is they're numbing. And I'm thinking they're not emotionally sober, right? That's a language that they're not emotionally sober yet. They've got to get well with themselves in order to figure out how they move forward, right? You had the third group, I would have said like avoidance, right? It's like they didn't really have a lot of consequence either. It sounded like they're like, what were the stakes? The second group you had mentioned, it sounds like this, when we talk about like you believe in the story, but not necessarily the reality. You've stuck to the story, that you've cast the characters. This is the way it. And so how do we flip the script on that? If you have decided this is the story and this is the one you're sticking to, it can't change. You can't rebuild. You've cast everyone.
And this is when you have symptoms of post-betrayal syndrome, which was the second discovery. And this is when you get and stay stuck, which I could talk about the third discovery as well. It's a mess in those 2 places. It's a really painful place to stay. That was the second discovery actually, which was that there's this collection of symptoms, physical, mental, and emotional, so common to betrayal. It's known as post-betrayal syndrome. And we've all been taught time heals all wounds. I have the proof that when it comes to betrayal, that's not true.
Yeah.
We've had
laugh at that one. Yes.
Yeah. We've had 95,000 plus people take our post-betrayal syndrome quiz on our site to see to what extent they're struggling. And people, there's a place where I ask them, is there anything else you'd like to share? And people write things like, my betrayal happened 40 years ago and I can still feel the hate. My betrayal happened 35 years ago. I'm unwilling to trust. So we know you cannot count on time. You can't count even on a new relationship to heal it. Healing needs to be deliberate and intentional, or those symptoms, which I'm happy to share the symptoms, they will show up for decades. And the older we get, the more we assume, oh, it must be from stress. It must be from, my daily whatever. No, it's not. It's from that unhealed betrayal that could have happened decades ago.
This is so freaking important what you just shared here. I'm happy to even hear these symptoms. I think that's important to be valuable, right? I'm also curious, as a trauma specialist, we have very particular symptoms that we're looking at for PTSD, right? And I won't go into it, audience. Go ahead and head to Google if you need to look that up, right? But we have very particular symptoms that say, this is the trauma that is stored in the body. This is how we know that this is what's showing up. And for the audience, I will share with you the difference between something dramatic, DRAMATIC, happening in your life versus something traumatic, TRAUMATIC, is that only one of those will continue to live on in your body. That's what trauma is, right? 2 people who have, I'm just going to say, a car accident doesn't mean both people will store that in their body as trauma. But if your body holds onto that material and it keeps coming back to that, this is where we say, oh, we may be dealing with some trauma. In this case, we have a relational trauma, right? The betrayals that happen between us and other individuals. I'm very curious to hear, like, what are we looking for with thoughts and feelings and behaviors? So we say, hey, this is my yellow or red flag that maybe I need to lean into this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll share the stats and then I can't wait to get to the third discovery because that's how you move through all of it. So, okay. So now imagine men, women, just about every country is represented, 95,000 plus people. 78% constantly revisit their experience. 81% feel a loss of personal power. 80% are hypervigilant. I mean, that's exhausting. 94% deal with painful triggers. That and those triggers are so painful. The most common, and you mentioned also PTSD, very common to have PTSD symptoms with betrayal. And they're always minimized. People think, oh, it's only reserved for like war vets. You know, they hear a car backfire and they're reminded of their time in war. No, you can have a trigger and you are right back there to D-Day, Discovery Day.
Ding, ding, ding.
Yeah. The most common physical symptoms, 71% have low energy, 68% have sleep issues, 63% have extreme fatigue. So your adrenals have tanked. You wake up, you're exhausted. 47% have weight changes. In the beginning, maybe you're losing weight because you can't hold any food down. Later on, you're emotionally eating using food for comfort. 45% have a digestive issue, and that could be anything. Crohn's, IBS, diverticulitis, you name it. The most common mental symptoms, 78% are overwhelmed, 70% are walking around in a state of disbelief, 68% can't focus, 64% are in shock, 62% can't concentrate. So imagine you can't concentrate, you have a gut issue, you're exhausted, you have to show up at work every day, you have to raise your kids. That's not even the emotional issues. Emotionally, 88% experience extreme sadness. 83% are very angry. You could be going back and forth between those two all day long. 82% feel hurt. 80% have anxiety. 79% are stressed. Just a few more. Here's why I wrote the book Trust Again. This one right here. 84% have an inability to trust. I mean, that just killed me. 67% prevent themselves from forming deep relationships because they're afraid of being hurt again. 82% find it hard to move forward. 90% want to move forward, but they don't know how. Staggering, right?
Staggering is really, I think, a very apt word for that. Staggering.
And what's even crazier, you didn't hear me say one thing, 20%, 30%. These numbers are super high. They're also not necessarily from a recent betrayal. So think about that parent who did something awful when you were a kid, that girlfriend or boyfriend who broke your heart in high school. That person may not know, care, remember, they may not even be alive. And here we are with symptoms today because of something that happened decades ago. The good news is you can heal from all of it, which was the third discovery, but this is how we walk around.
You know, even as you say that, what struck me this week, I love too, right? We're hearing very much The Body Keeps the Score. The Body Keeps the Score. It's a great book, everyone, resource, definitely, look it up. But even with what you're saying, I listen to these staggering numbers. And I think if that much of the population is struggling with this, right? To what degree has it become normalized?
Yeah.
That's scary. I don't know if we know that, right? But to what degree has it become normalized to betray or to not even heal from this, is to say, well, this is how it is. We can't trust anybody, and then that becomes this blanket statement and how you live your life.
And what you teach your kids and how you move into every relationship or not, the guard that the big wall you have up. I mean, it shows up in health and work and relationships. Happy to share how it shows up. Also happy to share the third discovery if you want to hear that.
Yes, I definitely want to hear, right? This is what we're hearing too, right? In these symptoms, y'all, is at its base level, right? When I work with somebody, when I sit across from them and maybe Dr. Debi told them something different, but when I'm there, I say, this is protective. It's just now maladaptively trying to protect you. It's not actually protecting you from a present danger anymore. It is projecting that there is danger from a blueprint that is older than this moment, right? Yes. So I'm very much ready to hear the third bit.
Yeah. So it's what all of our coaches are certified in. It's all we do within the PBT Institute. It's all mapped out in Trust Again. Here's a boiled down version. Stage 1 is before it happens. And if you can imagine 4 legs of a table, the 4 legs being physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, what I saw with everybody, me too, was a heavy lean on the physical and the mental, thinking and doing, and kind of neglecting or ignoring the emotional and the spiritual, feeling and being. Well, if a table only has 2 legs, easy for that table to topple over. That's us. Stage shock, trauma, D-Day, Discovery Day, by far the scariest of all of the stages. And it's the breakdown of the body, the mind, and the worldview. Right here, you've got the news that forever changes life as you've known it. You've ignited the stress response. So now you're headed for every single stress-related symptom, illness, condition, disease. Your mind is in a complete and total state of chaos and overwhelm. You cannot wrap your mind around what you just learned. This makes no sense. And your worldview has just been shattered. Your worldview is your mental model, the rules that govern you, that protect you. Don't go there, trust this person. And in one moment, every rule you've been holding to be real and true is no longer. The bottom has truly bottomed out on you, and a new bottom hasn't been formed yet. So this is terrifying. But think about it. If the bottom were to bottom out on you, what would you do? You'd grab hold of anything or anyone to stay safe and stay alive. And that's stage 3. Exactly. Survival instincts emerge. It's the most practical out of all of the stages. If you can't help me, get out of my way. How do I survive this experience? Where do I go? Who can I trust? Here's the trap though. Stage 3, by far, hands down, is the most common place we get stuck. And here's why. Once we figured out how to survive our experience, because it feels so much better than the shock and trauma of where we just came from, we think it's good. And because we don't know there's anywhere else to go, we don't know there's a stage 4 or stage 5. Transformation doesn't even begin until stage 4. But because we don't know there's anywhere else to go, we plant roots here. We're not supposed to, but we don't know that. And 4 things happen. The first thing is, and this, I'm sure most of your clients are in this place right here. We start getting all those small self benefits. We get to be right. We get our story. We get a target for our anger. We get someone to blame. We get sympathy from everyone we tell our story to. And we don't feel we're getting really much else. So this feels good. So we plant deeper roots. Now, because we're here longer than we should be, the mind starts doing things like, maybe you're not that great. Maybe you deserved it. Maybe this, maybe that. So we plant deeper roots. Again, we're not supposed to be here, but we don't know. Now, because these are the thoughts we're thinking, well, this is the energy we're putting out. Like energy attracts like energy. And now we start attracting circumstances and relationships and situations and people confirming this is where we belong. The misery loves company crowd, they find you now. That lame support group that keeps you stuck, where you actually will sabotage yourself because you don't want to outgrow your new people. You find them right here, right? And it gets worse, but I'll get you out of here. Because it feels so bad, but we don't know there's anywhere else to go. We're like, this stinks, but I have to get through my day. I have to just survive this. Here's where we start using food, drugs, alcohol, work, TV, whatever. So think about it. We do it for a day, a week, a month. Now it's a habit, a year, 10 years, 20 years. I can see someone 20 years later and say, that emotional eating you're doing, that drinking, that numbing in front of the TV, do you think that has anything to do with your betrayal? And they would look at me like I'm crazy. And they would say it happened 20 years ago. All they did was put themselves in stage 3 and stay there. That makes sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's why I wrote From Hardened to Healed. Trust again moves you through the 5 stages, but everybody was locking themselves in stage 3. So From Hardened to Healed is just for stage 3. Like you've been through the worst of it already. You owe it to yourself to have the transformation that's waiting for you in stages 4 and stage 5. Anyway, can I get you to stage 4 and stage 5? I don't want to leave anybody in
absolutely. No, absolutely. I hear when you're talking about stage 3, and I think of the line that I most often hear before people have then come to me, right? And they're like, it's not enough, is what I often hear is, I thought it was enough. I thought that like I had done enough work and I'd healed enough. Like I needed to keep going. Like I couldn't keep going back to that. And then I'm like, well, what if you never had to? What if it wasn't a trigger button in you at all anymore?
Exactly. Yeah.
So 4 and 5, what is it with the extra work? Tell us. Yeah.
So if you're willingness is the big word right here. You are willing to let go of those small self benefits, the story, everything you get with it, grieve, mourn the loss, bunch of things you need to do. You move to stage 4. Stage 4 is finding and adjusting to a new normal. So here's where you acknowledge, I can't undo what happened, but I control what I do with it. Just even in that decision, you turn down the stress response. You're not healing just yet, but at least you stop the damage that you've been creating in stages 2 and stage 3. Yeah. Stage 4 feels like, if you've ever moved, If you've ever moved to a new house, office, condo, apartment, whatever, all your stuff's not there. It's not quite cozy yet, but you're like, okay, we got this. We can do this. It feels like that. But
Unfamiliar, but new.
yeah, but hopeful,
Unfamiliar.
right? But new. But it's so interesting because think about this. If you were to move, you don't take everything with you. And what I found was there's one spot going from stage 3 to stage 4 where if your friends weren't there for you, you've outgrown them right here. That lame support group, that misery loves company crowd,
Yes.
right here, you've outgrown them. And people say to me all the time, what the heck? I've had these friends years. Is it me? Yes, it is. You're undergoing a transformation. And if they don't rise, they don't come along. You're very deliberate and intentional about who you're spending time with right here. Everything's changing. Anyway, when you've settled in to this new mental state, you've made it cozy, you've made it home, you move into the 5th most beautiful stage, and this is healing, rebirth, and a new worldview. The body starts to heal. Self-love, self-care, eating well, exercise. You didn't have the bandwidth for that earlier. Now you do. Now you're prioritizing it. Your mind is healing. You're making new rules. You're making new boundaries based on the road you just traveled. And you have a new worldview based on everything you see so clearly now. And the 4 legs of that table, in the beginning, it was all about the physical and the mental. By this point, we're solidly grounded because we're focused on the emotional and the spiritual too. Those are the 5 stages.
That is, is so beautiful. Can we get just the titles of those 5 stages now, just for everybody who's journaling out there? Now they can put it into that perspective again.
Sure. So in stage 1, we're prioritizing the physical and the mental over the emotional and the spiritual. Stage 2 is the breakdown of the body, the mind, the worldview. Stage 3, survival instincts emerge. Stage 4, finding and adjusting to a new normal. And stage 5, it's a healing, rebirth, and a new worldview.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for being willing and able to go through all of that, Dr. Debi. Even in just that share, there's so much goodness, so many golden nuggets you're giving us here. But even in just this share, the line that sticks with me is, you are going through a transformation. If they cannot rise to your level, right? They cannot rise to that level. They're going to be left behind. They need you. We have to move forward. It's a transformation here.
It is. And it's a lonely process too. It's not a lonely, it's a personal process. And here's where, when you think about that, we've always heard of the caterpillar turning into the butterfly. It's that caterpillar doesn't get to be the butterfly unless and until it's willing to get messy, sticky, that process. I mean, think about it. It becomes emulsified, unrecognizable from anything it once was. Only because it went through that does it get to be that butterfly. But it also goes in there alone. You will have a lot of people around you who do not like what you're up to when you're undergoing a transformation, because they liked knowing where that they can push you around, or they like knowing where they stood, or you're shaking things up. And this is exactly the reason why so often people will sabotage themselves. I see it all the time because they are so afraid of the unknown, of the unfamiliar. And they would rather have the familiar known, their betrayer, who has no intention of changing. They will sabotage their healing and growth because they're saying they're worried, well, what if they don't grow with me? Well, so what are you signing up for then? And or that friend group, well, I don't want to be alone, so then you just sabotage, because that's just what, the only benefit, the only one is that it's familiar. But if you think about it, every single thing in your life you're doing now was once unfamiliar. If you are only willing to be, to navigate into this a little bit of uncharted territory, it's going to be so much better. And if you find your people who are growing and evolving as well, you're moving towards something so much more aligned with who you're ready to become.
Oh my gosh, Dr. Debi, we are nearing the end of the episode. And this is the point where I say, what are you taking away? What am I taking away? Just in what you just shared. Again, I can't wait to read your book. Just in what you just shared. Some of the pieces, I won't be able to even reflect it all back because there's so much goodness in this. But here's what I am taking even in this last bit. First off, I love me a good metaphor. I am a drama therapist by trade. I love me a good healing metaphor. And one of the things that you shared is sort of the butterfly metaphor, right? That this is a transformational process, that you cannot become the butterfly that is capable of flying, of moving about, of expressing so much more, right? With your own colors and patterns and things. You cannot be that expressive, transformative being that is the butterfly without going through the stickiness and the work of the cocoon. It cannot be done. And so even in that, what I would invite our listeners out there to really ask themselves in a little mini creative assessment is, do you feel like you're at a caterpillar stage and you're wondering, why am I stuck here? Do you feel stuck at the caterpillar stage? That is one of the things I would say, right? Do you feel like, I don't even feel like I'm at the caterpillar stage, Nina? I feel like I'm in the egg still. Like I can tell, like the betrayal's happening. I can't get out of the egg. I can't get out. I keep going. Oh, okay. So we see this is what's happening, right? Do you feel like you're at the cocoon stage? Right? Or are you like, no, I'm the butterfly. I've been there, right? This episode is for somebody else now, right? But really being able to know, where are you in the process? Another thing that you had, go ahead. You wanted to say something really quick?
Yeah, I was going to say, and I'll tell you, if everybody had any idea what's waiting for them in stages 4 and stage 5, they would never waste their time in stage 3. In stages 4 and stage 5, that's where we see new levels of health. That's where we see new businesses. That's where we see new relationships on such a different level that you didn't have access to earlier, whether it was with the person who hurt you, that's an entirely different relationship, or with someone totally new. Like, just a real quick example.
Yeah.
I hosted a retreat for the people who sign up to move through all 5 stages in 6 months. They work with me personally, along with our coaches and everything. And I had 11 of them there. 4 out of the 11 started new businesses. Yes. It's so common, because once you move through what you never saw coming, what you never thought you could heal from, you're like, well, if I could do that, what else could I do? So there's so much goodness. Like the PBT Institute, that was a stage 5 thing. My new marriage to my husband, that was a stage 5 thing.
Yes.
You don't have access to these things in stage 3. So you owe it to yourself to move through the stages and enjoy what's waiting for you on the other side.
100%. Y'all, the transformation that is possible when you are willing to show up and do that work, right? What I love about what Dr. Debi continues to come back to and say to everybody, so I hope you all are hearing this, is she has the system set up to help support you through this process in a time-limited fashion, right? It is here, show up, do the work. We're consistent. We know how to make this happen for you. And one of the other bits that I feel is so important that we just briefly, you touched on it so briefly, and I think it's really critically important because it pops up all the time. And this is where I will hear people say, I just feel like I need to stop. I feel like I need to process this, is they'll feel the grief of the loss of those people at stage 3. The grief of the loss of the groups that have been holding them back, that have been keeping them down, that have not been lifting them up or making them shine in their most vibrant way, right? They'll feel the grief of that loss. And it is at that point that we say, we're going to acknowledge there is going to be loss in this. And it is so that you can shine vibrant. We're relieving ourselves of weight, unnecessary responsibility for others. And it's just to shine vibrantly. It's just like, whoo.
And I love that you brought up the grieving piece, because we have so many of our members that they're like, I'm doing so great. What the heck? I feel so sad all of a sudden. The grief is beautiful, because that's where you realize that chapter is really over. And that is such a beautiful healing and defining moment. And one of the most crucial pieces in moving us from stage 3 to stage 4, because until you're grieving, you're still holding on to the past. You're still trying to make it what it was. You're still, you haven't accepted. So the grieving is huge and hugely transformative.
Hugely transformative. The last thing that I'm going to say back that you shared this, because I want our listeners to hear this again, is really, if you were to ask yourself, y'all, if there was something beyond the curtain, beyond the wall, beyond the shell, beyond the cocoon, if there was something more than this, and you knew that there was something more than this, would you be willing to do the work to make it happen? Dr. Debi knows 95,000 people. I know, right? We know this. It is possible if you're willing to show up and do that work. And you have the program for it when it comes to betrayal.
Not even possible, predictable.
Ooh, I love it when we have one of those moments. Chills. Not even possible. But at this point, you know it is predictable. we can predict the healing process in this phase.
100%. All it is moving through the 5 stages from betrayal to breakthrough.
Oh my goodness. Y'all got to hear that. Okay. All we got to do is move through them 5 stages. All you got to do is move through them. Okay. Dr. Debi, thank you so much for being willing to transform hard conversations into so many teachable moments for us. Where can people find you? It will, of course, be in our show notes, but I like them to hear it from you personally.
Thank you. Everything is at the PBT, as in Post Betrayal Transformation, thepbtinstitute.com.
thepbtinstitute.com. Of course, it'll be in the show notes, friends. I am filled with so much gratitude for you right now, Dr. Debi. I can't wait to go in there and look at it. My podcast listeners know, I don't expect you to know this, but they know I have been struggling with betrayal from my ex and from a sister who cut me out of the wedding mid-divorce. And I cannot yet get over it. And so I am ready to lean in. I'm ready to move forward. For everyone out there who knows, we're ready to lean into these spaces. I hope that you have heard what Dr. Debi has to offer. This is a predictable process, right? Healing in particular with the PBT Institute for this episode, y'all. That's our resource. That's our share. Thank you, Dr. Debi.
Thank you so much.
And to all of you listeners out there, thank you so much for being willing to explore your triggers as a human being. If this episode was helpful for you, please share the episode. I know that you know someone who's like, Nina, I'm on the merry-go-round of betrayal and I don't know how to get off. This could be the episode that they need to hear to help open up their options for healing. So please, that's one of the best things you could do. Just share the episode. Otherwise, thank you so much for being human with us and stay curious.